Welcome to another Healthusiasm monologue. This time, I'll talk about what healthcare providers and even perhaps the healthcare system at large can actually learn from the Covid-19 measures. I hope you enjoy.
Welcome to the Healthusiasm monologue by Christophe Joquet, a spoken column about making customers healthy and happy.
So the measures against the spread of the coronavirus, they have been around for about 6 months now. It has become part of our life, our new reality, if you will. And maybe we've even started growing into some of them. But maybe not. Because if you look around, more and more people are putting up some resistance against these measures. Protests are taking place in big cities across Europe. And 10,000 people, they are gathering on the streets to have their freedom back, to have their voices heard, to actually demonstrate against these measures. But even at a smaller scale, when we talk with our friends at dinner, for example, it's often talked about, whether these measures are rightfully in place or not, whether they have any necessity. Now, I don't want to get into a discussion about whether specific measures are the right ones or not. I don't want to argue in favor or against some of them. No, I rather want to reflect upon this recent change in attitude. How did we go about simply obeying to actually fighting against it? Because at the beginning of the lockdown in late March, people were basically rather obedient. Almost everybody carefully followed these measures, right? It wasn't that we were happy with them, but we did comply to what was expected from us. If we look at it, the situation now, people are at least confused about the importance as well as the impact of them, and so some of them even want to have them removed immediately. Even so, what has happened? How did we go from following these rules to actually fighting against it? The answer is, of course, not that straightforward, is not that easy, and it has several angles and multiple reasons, of course. But I'd like to point out two particular elements that might partially explain the recent changes that we have seen. Two elements, I believe, from which even healthcare professionals could learn. And those two elements are a system-based approach and fear-based decision-making. I'll start with the last one, with the latter. Fear-based decision-making. Now again, at the beginning of the lockdown, we took decisions and they were based on fear. Measures were decided upon based on fear. We decided to comply to these measures based on fear. This is who we are as human beings. This is part of our logic. When somebody puts a gun against our heads, well, we will carefully listen to them and, we will do what they want from us. We will comply to their demands. Fear-based decision-making. But if that gun keeps on being pointed at us for a very, very, very long time, well, at a certain point, we will no longer want to give in to that fear. We will no longer want to follow their demands because it's not worth to continue that way. Our emotions take over from that logic. Now, looking at patients, they actually behave in exactly that same way when they're confronted with a new disease. They fear it, will change their lifestyle because of it, and even will comply to, the health measures that are imposed to them. Take, for example, people with a high cholesterol. When just being diagnosed, they might change their lifestyle, take the medication every day, because they are simply suddenly, confronted with what can be a very deadly condition at some point. They fear everything they hear about it and act accordingly. Fear-based decision making again. But after a while, what you'll see is that fear might fade out. In the case of high cholesterol, patients hardly even have any symptoms. So the fear-based decision making slowly fades away, as do the lifestyle changes or the adherence to the medication. However, it is possible to have people adapt their habits to a life with high cholesterol. But for that, we need to get rid of that fear-based decision making, because it simply is not sustainable over time. Look at how people today are tired of living with fear. They are tired of living with all these corona measures. But to be able to achieve this, to be able to actually change our habits, we need to get rid of something else as well. A system-centered approach. Instead, we need to install a people-centered approach. Instead of making people afraid, we need to objectively inform them more, but also differently than we currently do. But we also need to understand their reality and take that into account. And by taking it into account, I do not mean, to force some more decisions upon them. No, but to actually offer them the additional information that they will need. Personal trainers, health coaches, dietitians, they have long understood the power of this approach, of this people-centered approach. They are often the perfect examples of how to install this people-centered approach. Let's take dietitians, for example. I'm not a dietitian myself, nor am I a food expert, but what I've seen in the past decade or so is I've seen a big change in the way that they are working. It's not about finger pointing. It's not about finger pointing what you can and what you can't do. No, it's about food literacy. It's about explaining the impact of the things that they are doing and making them discover, together with the clients, what works for them in their lives. How several small changes can actually make a difference in their lives. It's never about fear, and it's never about pushing things down to them. It's about a people-centered approach. What will work for them specifically? How can we include some small changes so that they can actually change their habits? That same evolution you can see in the fitness world. Personal trainers are all about this people-centered approach. They are the specialists, so they certainly know more about these kind of things, about exercising and what to do than their clients. And it would be easy just to oblige them to do it. But they simply have discovered that this does not work. Telling somebody to do something, even if a personal coach is actually paid to do that, well, it won't work in the long run. People will only persist to exercise if it fits their own life and if it makes sense to them. Never out of fear, because they need to understand it. And only then it will work for them. So to me, this is in part what causes people to resist against the COVID-19 measures today as well. But this is also why patients often simply don't comply with their therapy, their medication, or the necessary lifestyle change that they need to make. Because way too often, it's a system-centered approach that installs fear-based decision-making. And both of these things are unsuccessful in the long run. So let's focus on people. Let's give them the right information so that they can take up and take the measures that they actually need to take for themselves. I hope you enjoyed this Healthusiasm monologue. Please reach out to me if you want to discuss this. I'll be happy to talk with you. Bye-bye.